All right, this is the last of my live videos for the day. I wanted to hop online and just go over a few tracking 101 tips and tricks. Like I said, this is the last video I'll do tonight. But I just want to touch on a few things, things that I've learned while tracking macros. So the app that I use is MyFitnessPal. If you have an app that you already like, go ahead and use that. MyFitnessPal is the one that I'm most familiar with. I've been using that for a few years. So use whatever works, as long as you can put in a number of calories as well as percentages. I've already kind of touched on this, but you don't necessarily need premium version of MyFitnessPal. There's some definite advantages to MyFitnessPal Premium, but the free version will work just fine. So let's touch on a few things. Number one, first thing I want you to focus on in the macros that I've sent you, if you've decided to track macros, is proteins. Proteins is home base, okay? So we're going to talk a lot about proteins in this first week and a lot of different protein sources. I already sent out quite a bit of protein information in the email that you received yesterday. If you did not receive that email, I encourage you to check your trash and your spam. It may have gone there, and then just add that email address to your contacts so that you can open those emails. But proteins can be one of the most challenging pieces to this entire puzzle, and you may notice that that can be the hardest macro to meet. So I want you to start with proteins, okay? It's going to help curb hunger. Many of you are in fat loss macros right now. Fat loss is your goal. So we are working a calorie deficit. And that calorie deficit, in order to curb the hunger that may come along with that, I need you to be reaching for that protein goal. So start with proteins. Proteins is your home base, right? Number 2 pro tip, enter in the entire day at the beginning of the day. Another approach to this would be to enter in something you are going to eat before you eat it, okay? In the beginning, it's kind of hard to figure out where things are going to land in your macros, so I would recommend that you enter things before you eat them, perhaps enter the entire day before the day begins. Number 3, in MyFitnessPal, it will default to logging so that your exercise gives you calories back, and I want you to turn that setting off. Okay, I don't know why it defaults there, but we need to turn that setting off. And the only way to turn off that setting is if you have the premium version. So if you are working the free version of MyFitnessPal, you will need to just not log any exercise within the app, or unlink your Fitbit, your activity tracker, whatever that is. We do not want to award back calories with activity. So make sure you turn that setting off. Number 4, we are shooting to hit the grams number. So I did send you all calorie totals, and then you can enter in the percentages for the fats, proteins, and carbs. But the end goal in tracking macros is that you are working to do plus or minus 5 grams of each of those macronutrients, okay? So work toward plus or minus 5. That's the goal. One thing I want to touch on is that logging your food and tracking macros is a different thing. I mistakenly kind of use the two terms interchangeably, but logging your food is writing down what you're eating and then becoming aware and understanding what you're putting in your body. Tracking your macros is working toward hitting your gram percentage and your plus or minus 5 grams for each of the macros. So for those of you that want to track macros, I sent over calories with a percentage. It's going to automatically calculate those grams. Tracking macros is to the gram. Logging food is just logging the food and understanding what you're eating. Okay, another point I want to touch on, I think I'm on point number 5, is that we want to be looking at the nutrients screen in tracking macros. So you may be looking at that pie chart in MyFitnessPal. It's labeled macros. And trust me, this is a really great way to kind of monitor where you're at. I use this chart to monitor where I'm at for the day. I personally know that I need to load my proteins in the beginning of the day and save my fats for the end of the day for dinners. So the percentage pie chart is a great way to figure out where you're at during the day. But what I'm most interested in and what you're most interested in is the nutrients screen, the plus or minus 5 grams for each of the macros, okay? So I posted tonight, like the very first, where are you with your macros? The screenshot that I am looking at is the nutrients screenshot. The pie chart's great. It's not going to help me as much. The other reason that I need to see the grams is that is going to help me determine whether or not there's an overeating or undereating scenario. Okay, so please provide that nutrients screen. That's going to help determine if we're on board with our macros. All right, next point, weighing food. Grams is the most accurate unit of measurement for tracking macros, but just use your best guess. Sometimes, especially with veggies, so you've got kind of a low carb count, not a whole lot of other macros going into vegetables, maybe some proteins with broccoli and such. But grams is the best unit of measurement. You may end up using ounces at some point. I logged chicken and proteins with ounces for a long time. Grams is the most accurate, but best guess, you know. So try to weigh your food using grams. Some of the MyFitnessPal entries don't have a grams option. You may need to do ounces. You may need to find another MyFitnessPal logging option. Sometimes, like for instance, if you put in chicken breast, you'll see lots of different options in MyFitnessPal. One thing to look for is the green check mark is like a certified MyFitnessPal, like they've checked it, it's correct. So anyone can kind of put anything in MFP, but if you have that green check mark, you know that it's like a legit tracking. So try to find those, try to weigh in grams when you can. And then as far as cooked versus uncooked, you can kind of go both ways here. So however you're logging it, try to find an entry that matches the way you've measured it. So for instance, quinoa, that's a great example. If you are weighing out quinoa, just find that quinoa that you're cooking, whether it's cooked or uncooked. It'll specify in MyFitnessPal if you search for it. So if I'm going to measure it out uncooked, I'll put in tricolor quinoa uncooked, and then I'll find that quinoa or the best guess of what that quinoa is. The other thing you can do is actually just scan the label, which is a super nice feature of MyFitnessPal. So scan the label, it'll match to that food in their database, and then select how much, you know. So best guess on if you are measuring cooked versus uncooked, but try to specify it in MyFitnessPal. Last, or 2 points. So if you are eating out, and we'll go over a lot more of this in the weekend strategies, but if you are eating out, just use your best guess. People often ask, like, how do you track something if you can't find it in MyFitnessPal? Just be as accurate as you can. Try to break down the ingredients if you can. Pay attention to what 4 or 5 ounces of chicken looks like. You'll start to get really used to this as you're tracking food. It gets easier, it gets better, your estimates get better. So best guess is the best you can do. And then what was the last point I wanted to touch on? recipes. So if you are cooking up, an example is I once a week will often do like peanut butter, oat, protein, energy snack balls, right? But that recipe makes me like 8 servings of 2 balls each. So I will log the entire recipe. There's a recipe function in MyFitnessPal. I will select that it makes 8 servings. You can save that recipe and then you can log one of those servings each time you eat one of those servings. So that's a great approach if you're trying out new recipes. I will also share a couple of resources this week on like macro-friendly recipe websites if you're looking to kind of change up your menu a little bit. But do the best you can with those recipes. MyFitnessPal logging, it's never going to be perfect, but just do the best you can. If you have any questions about how to log something in MyFitnessPal, comment in this video or shoot me an email or shoot me a text or whatever it is, and we'll get it figured out. And happy tracking.